Good morning and welcome to this virtual policy forum on impact-driven peacekeeping partnerships for capacity building and training. My name is Namie Di Razza. I am a senior fellow at IPI's Boyan Orkrat Center for Peace Operations and the head of IPI's Protection of Civilians program. I would like to thank the governments of Ethiopia, Indonesia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea who are co-hosting this event with us today and will co-host the preparatory meeting on training, capacity building, and partnerships for the next Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference in 2021. Since 2014, the Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference has been institutionalized as a high-profile forum for member states to publicly reaffirm their commitment to UN peacekeeping and pledge specialized capabilities to enhance the performance of peacekeepers and the delivery of Security Council mandates. Past ministerials have been the occasion to pledge personnel, equipment, and training partnerships to improve the safety and security of peacekeepers, the implementation of protection of civilians mandates, the inclusion of women, peace and security agenda in the work of peacekeepers, and more generally, the effectiveness and impact of UN operations. In the context of the Action for Peacekeeping initiative, the next ministerial conference, scheduled for April 2021 in Seoul, is expected to continue this practice. It will aim at discussing systemic challenges facing missions, generating specialized capabilities, and facilitating partnerships to address systemic issues and strengthen UN peacekeeping. In the lead up to this high-level event, member states will organize preparatory meetings in coordination with the UN Secretariat to identify the needs and concrete high-impact pledges in priority areas. A dedicated preparatory conference will be organized in Addis Ababa to specifically look at training and capacity building, a major area of interest for troop and police contributing countries. To inform this process, IPI has prepared a white paper to help member states plan for concrete, meaningful, and impactful capacity building and training pledges. Today's discussion will provide an opportunity to present and discuss the paper offered by my colleague, Arthur Bouteris. I would like to thank the Republic of Korea for the support to this paper, and I will invite Ambassador Cho Yun, the permanent representative of the Republic of Korea to the UN, for opening remarks. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Namie. Thank you. Let me congratulate the IPI for hosting this webinar today. It is very timely, and the issues we will discuss today are all relevant, particularly under the COVID-19 situation. Accordingly, I take pride in having initiated this event together with other co-chairs. Well, in peacekeeping, we all agree that training and capacity building are the cornerstone for ensuring the efficient performance and the safety and security of all peacekeepers. Therefore, I hope that today's program will lead up to the interactive discussion on how we can upgrade training and capacity building of all peacekeepers. This will be also one of the main issues at the 2021 Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference in Seoul. However, this is just a kickoff for the ministerial meeting in April next year. We will have further occasions and opportunities to explore ways to maximize tangible outcomes, maybe in the broader context of Secretary General's Action for Peace initiative. So let me emphasize once again that this webinar is just the first step towards the successful ministerial next year. Well, today's event, as said by Namie, is based on the IPI's impressive white paper sponsored by my government. And I would like to highlight 3 points. First, in response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we are in dire need of strengthening medical capacity in peacekeeping operations. And to strengthen the medical capacity, we need to discover best practices in medical capacity building and share them among all peacekeepers as early as possible. To this end, Korea will explore ways to contribute to the discussion, and we hope that we'll be able to come up with concrete suggestions at the ministerial. Second, on women participation. Yes, we have to expand women's participation in peacekeeping operations. And to do so, we need capacity building as well. There have recently been successful cases of countries increasing women participation, and it would be beneficial to hear their experiences and perspectives. However, we all know that it's easier said than done. There are still numerous barriers and challenges against uniformed women in the field. Hence, we need to discuss how to overcome these challenges. And we may have to explore some new ideas, such as sending female platoon instead of just a few women peacekeepers in a platoon mainly composed of the men. Such women platoon might be also better placed for engaging with local communities. Finally, on technology. Bearing in mind the necessity of digital technology and the reality of digital divide in peacekeeping operations, we need to explore innovative solutions. In this context, I would like to raise a few questions to the panelists, to the speakers. I'm sorry to raise questions even before the presentation, but at least you can give us the answer after your presentation. First, would it be possible to create a pool of digital technology assets that the PKO has an access to and authority to administer? Second, how can we best facilitate triangular cooperation between the United Nations, financial contributors, and TCC/PCC? In addition, how could we best standardize technology across the missions? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to conclude my remarks by reiterating my deep appreciation to you all for participating in today's webinar. Leading up to the next year's Peacekeeping Ministerial in Seoul, let's work together, and I count on your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you for starting asking questions. I'm sure panelists will address some of these in the presentation and during the Q&A as well. But it's now my pleasure to turn to Ambassador Dian Triansyah-Jani, Permanent Representative of Indonesia to the UN, who will also share opening remarks with us before we turn to the panel. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Namie. I hope you can hear me. Right. Okay. Excellencies, Ambassador Jun, as well as distinguished panelists, colleagues. It's an honor for Indonesia to co-host this future event on peacekeeping partnership for training and capacity building, together with Ethiopia, Japan, Korea, and of course the International Peace Institute, where we always have close coordination. As a long-standing supporter of peacekeeping and one of the biggest troop and police contributors in the United Nations, currently in the UN Security Council, we are now the largest TCC/PCCs. And of course, we are strongly committed to continue making peacekeeping more effective and fit for purpose. In our 1.5 years already in the Council, we keep on pushing for this issue, especially May, we had a discussion on this issue last year of May. And one thing that I would like to highlight is that after visiting many UN missions and talking to the peacekeepers on the ground, I found out that there are 3 main points that I think would be very good for the discussion today. First, on the issue of training and capacity building, which are crucial to improve peacekeeping performance. There is a need for training for peacekeepers to be able to perform their duties more effectively and enhance the safety and security of the blue helmets. Training should be adaptive to current condition on the ground and development in the international sphere. At present, for instance, there are challenges of COVID-19, which continues to plague many conflict areas. Thereby, the peacekeeper need to be cognizant on their role in assisting in efforts to address this issue on the ground. One of the lessons that we should learn from the current pandemic is the importance of training on health awareness, basic medical care, community health, and of course, how to convey all of this to the common population. Of course, this kind of training will equip all peacekeepers with the necessary skill, not only to take care of themselves. This is quite important because for us in Indonesia, we have continuously championed the issue of safety of peacekeeper, but also help the community more effectively during the pandemic. We, of course, as you know, have always advocated for more community engagement put into the training. And with this challenge of COVID-19, community engagement become more important than ever. And this is to win the hearts and minds. I just would like to underline again the word to win the hearts and minds, because PKO cannot be effective if they do not have the support of the local population. And of course, to better protect and serve the needs of the people, that's more important also. That's why in our Peacekeeping Training Center in Indonesia, we always train and prepare our peacekeeper with language skill, soft skill, understanding and respect to local culture. This sometimes we tend to forget in many TCC, PCC, in order to be able to engage with the community more effectively. And as part of our commitment to zero tolerance, the issue of sexual exploitation and abuse in peacekeeping, we also train the need to train our peacekeeper on prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, CA. This is important not only to maintain the integrity of peacekeeper, but also to build the trust from the people they serve. The great service of peacekeepers for peace should not be tarnished by the irresponsible act of few individuals. We continuously are very strict on this, and so far we have zero cases. Now, importance of also briefing the PKO what transpired in the international arena, because on many of my visits to the peacekeepers, there are some gaps between Security Council discussion with the synchronizing mandate implementation on the ground with expectation. So to put it quite simply is that when I asked many peacekeepers on the ground, do they know the Security Council resolution and what exactly it means? There is some discrepancies on this. So this is an important part that sometimes we tend to forget. And we also remind colleagues in the council itself not to come up with resolution that have so many mandates that even the commander cannot fulfill those mandates, doesn't even understand. If the force commander doesn't understand, can you expect the private or the sergeant to be able to understand it? The second point, we need to continue enhancing of partnership for training and capacity building. Building the capacity of the blue helmets require collective efforts by all stakeholders. It's not only the responsibility of TCC, PCC, but also everyone. Able to share military or police culture and expertise is important to ensure smooth cooperation on the ground by different TCC, PCC. This sometimes tends to be forgotten in many training. For instance, our culture in Indonesia might be different with the African culture or the military in Europe, this kind of thing. So the importance of having a joint training program, because you tend to have troops while the force commander will be coming from different countries. So this kind of culture, sharing of culture, or military culture or police culture is quite important. A stronger partnership will ensure a greater resources are available to enhance capacity of peacekeeper. And that's why we're also working for joint sending of mission, whereby we're working with other TCC, PCC and sharing equipment or sharing capacity. The other important issue is the third point is we need to build the capacity of women peacekeeper. I think Ambassador Jun also mentioned about this issue. For us, we are increasing the numbers of women peacekeeper. We found out in the practices, my minister went to our troops, and we found out that when handling cases of child or sexual abuse, the women, the local women will be more adept to talking with the women peacekeeper as opposed to the men peacekeeper. So they have to be equipped with the question or a training on psychology, the training on health, the training on addressing this social skill type of an issue. That's why I would like to underline once again the question of community engagement, cultural awareness, language skill, addressing sexual exploitation and violence against women and children. And all of this is actually a translation of the many points that has been raised in the Security Council chambers. As a matter of information, we are assuming the presidency of the Council next August, and we will continue to highlight the role of women peacekeepers. We're trying to come up with something concrete on this to support greater participation of women in peacekeeping. But not to confuse the issue of women peace and security. This is focusing on women peacekeepers. So because we found out that sometimes the facilities of women peacekeepers are not adapt to the needs. When we come up with policies, the secretariats as well as us also come up with the general policies on peacekeepers, while the need of women peacekeepers is quite different in many ways. For instance, living quarters, the question of having leave, because most of them are mothers also, they also have to take care of their children back home. These simple issues should have a different type of an approach. And I'm not going to ask questions like Ambassador Jun, because he has already asked quite a lot of questions, but I do hope from this discussion we could get inputs because we're already starting negotiation on this particular issue of women peacekeeper. So I hope with this today's discussion, and I have put 3 of my diplomats monitoring this, all the panelists' points as well as the question. We would love to hear more input on what needs to be done in the Council on women peacekeeper. So in closing, once again, to conclude by reiterating that peacekeeping is a collective undertaking, and all stakeholders must perform their responsibilities effectively, including the question of financing. And in this challenging time, we must provide full backing from realistic and clear mandates to political and financial support to our blue helmets. And just a matter of information, I mentioned to one country, we just saved one of their citizens by our peacekeepers simply because we have community engagement. And precisely the point that you should continue to increase the resources for peacekeepers. And once again, at the end of the day, this is the most concrete points that the United Nations can offer normal people on the ground. Because when they ask what have the UN done for us, while looking at the blue helmet, it's a clear sign rather than papers or resolution or any kind of things. But when the people see the blue helmet, then they see the flag of the UN is there. I'm sorry, I'm very idealistic on the issue of peacekeepers because this is a concrete issue. And I do hope that today's discussion will provide a meaningful contribution to our collective effort to make peacekeeping more fit for purpose. And thanks once again to IPI and colleagues, and I hope we can get clear information on this so that it could give more meat to the discussion on our presidency in August. So I'm not just always saying this statement, simply wanted to link all the webinars into something concrete. So I think I leave it at that. Once again, do apologize if it's a bit too long. Thanks so much, Namie.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you. It's great. Thank you for sharing all these initiatives from Indonesia and your priorities. I think it's important to stress the need for more community engagement and better training in soft skills and everything that can strengthen community engagement, especially for missions that are expected to protect civilians and really have an impact for local communities. And I think it speaks to our first point in this paper about really the need to link training and capacity building with impact on the ground. So we'll turn to the discussion about the paper. The white paper we're presenting today explores the current state and recent trends in capacity building and training. It identifies the gaps and priority areas where further progress is needed. And well, we have a very diverse range of experts on our panel today to discuss the recommendations. Mr. Arthur Boutelis is a senior non-resident advisor at IPI and the author of a white paper. So he will present the main findings and recommendations. Mr. Mark Pedersen is the director of Integrated Training Service, ITS, at the UN Department of Peace Operations. Ms. Christina Zetterlund is the Counselor Civilian Advisor of a permanent mission of Sweden to the United Nations. Mr. Michael Smith is the Director of the Office of Global Programs and Initiatives at the Bureau of Political Military Affairs at the US Department of State. Mr. Fumio Yamazaki is the Director of International Peace and Security Cooperation Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan. And Mr. Dawit Yorga is the Director of International Organizations Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Government of Ethiopia. So our panelist presentation will be followed by a Q&A session. So as they deliver their remarks, I invite you to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen if you would like to ask questions to panelists. There will also be an opportunity to use the raise hand function during the Q&A to intervene via audio. But first, let me turn to Arthur for a presentation of the paper. Arthur, the floor is yours.
Merci, Namie, and thank you all for this opportunity to present some of the findings of the IPI white paper, which has greatly benefited actually from inputs from member states and the UN Secretary. So thank you for that. I was going to present the whole paper, but since I only have 5 minutes, and I assume most of the audience today is actually familiar with recent trends and some of the persisting challenges, and I think the two ambassadors have already got us well into the substance of the conversation. I decided instead to focus on the main conclusions and some of the recommendations that we believe should guide member states as they plan and prepare to make concrete pledges for the ministerial next year. So the paper concludes that training and capacity building partnerships are most meaningful when they meet 4 conditions, one of those 4. A, when they are built on longer-term partnership, which is more likely to produce sustainable, systemic, and institutional capabilities within TCCs and PCCs. That is the ability to identify, vet, deploy, sustain, rotate personnel over time, personnel of quality, and also the ability to learn from those multiple deployments over the medium term. B, when they're tailored to the specific needs of the recipient country of this capacity building support, and they help address pressing and envision capability gaps in ongoing peace operations as identified by the missions themselves, by the UN. C, when they help speed up deployments and limit gaps when one TCC takes over from another, which is most relevant in the current context as we don't have any new peacekeeping mission. And that applies particularly to critical capabilities in short supply, such as aviation, medical, or engineering. And D, when they lead to a measurable improvement in the overall performance and impact of the mission on the ground. Looking at some of the specific recommendations, there are 13 of them, so I won't go into all of them, but I've selected 6 that we think should guide TCC, PCCs, and capacity providers, as well as the UN, when they look at training and capacity building partnership. The first one is, of course, leadership remains key to bringing about positive change and therefore requires sustained dedicated funding. I won't develop here, as I imagine Mark, Christina, Kiki, and others may speak to that as well. The second is that training and capacity building starts at home. I think that's an important point. Member states, TCCs, PCCs need to integrate and value peacekeeping into their own national curricula, develop their own national support system dedicated to peacekeeping. And I think this issue is relevant. This recommendation is also relevant when it comes to increasing the number of women peacekeepers, as of course it is an urgent matter, and we need to find short-term innovative solutions, but this is also, as we know, a medium-term, longer-term issue that requires systemic evolutions. And therefore, capacity providers with the means to do so could prioritize, we suggest, longer-term investments in a few motivated TCC, PCCs to help build the national systems and institutions that will allow them to deploy mission-ready individuals and units over multiple rotations over years. Third recommendation that I've selected to share with you is capacity providers interested in contributing to improve peacekeeping performance, but that do not have necessarily the resources to do it alone, should consider joining existing training partnerships program, such as the Triangular Partnership Projects, the TPP, which has expanded in scope and region, but also should consider forming joint capacity building partnerships when relevant among themselves. Fourth, in-mission trainings, which we've seen a proliferation of in the past few years, we believe should be limited to addressing capability gaps that are identified by the UN as critically hampering the security of TCC PCCs and or the implementation of the mandate of the mission, notably when it comes to protection of civilians. And we suggest that member states and the UN should explore practical modalities for increasing the feasibility of operational mentoring or accompanying of TCCs in those cases in the riskier peacekeeping operations. Fifth, member states and the UN should continue to strengthen the light coordination mechanism. We've seen that, especially since 2019, with the provision of dedicated staff and resources to the light coordination mechanism, the LCM, this has already been an important development in helping matching capacity building providers with TCCs in need for support and warrants continued support. And lastly, last but not least, six, member states and the UN, we believe, should work closely together to better link performance evaluation to training and capacity building efforts and introduce better feedback loops. I'll leave it to this, and I'm happy to discuss further in Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Alpha. I think you offered many examples and concrete recommendations to build meaningful partnerships for training and capacity building. I think it's important indeed to also emphasize the role of the UN in formulating and identifying capability gaps and needs in coordination with member states. You mentioned in particular the light coordination mechanism that is expected to deconflict and share best practices on training programs. In the paper, you also mentioned the Triangular Partnership Project, coordinated and managed by the UN. So maybe turning to Mark, I would be very interested in the Secretariat's perspectives on this and in your analysis of the current needs and priorities for new pledges for member states. What kind of resources should be provided according to the Secretariat? How can we better design and organize capacity building partnerships? Thank you, Mark, if you can provide some insights about this.
Thank you, Namie, and thank you to IPI for the opportunity to speak on this panel, and thank you to member states for championing this issue. Mr. Lacroix is unable to be here today due to other commitments. On his behalf, I would like to thank first the co-hosts for convening this meeting at IPI. That's the governments of Ethiopia, Indonesia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. In the Department of Peace Operations, we fully appreciate the high level of continued and reinvigorated support to UN peacekeeping by member states, including T and PCCs and the ministerial co-chairs. At the same time, our missions have worked hard to adapt and continue delivering on their important mandates during this period. I'd like to highlight the importance of maintaining momentum in the coming months through the preparatory conferences to achieve the objective of the ministerial. That is, strengthening UN peacekeeping by improving the performance and impact of UN peacekeeping operations, closing capability gaps through concrete pledges, facilitating new partnerships and strengthening new ones, and lastly, promoting systemic changes that will improve operations. The priority from now until April 2021 is to define concrete and tangible outcomes for the ministerial in line with A4P. Today's discussion on the paper will be another step in that effort. The paper prepared by Arthur comprehensively captures the key points, obstacles, and potential ways forward. I'll focus on three areas: the need to build self-sustaining national capacity, the importance of coordination and partnership arrangements through the light coordination mechanism and the Triangular Partnership Project, and areas where member states can help troop and police contributing countries. One aim of all capacity building programs should be to help T and PCCs become self-sustaining for their self-deployment for their pre-deployment preparations, training and rotations. Whilst much capacity building effort focuses on peacekeeping skills, unless these skills are built upon a solid professional basis of military and police skills, the result is a house built on sand. We know from Force Chiefs of Staff that the key weaknesses amongst deployed staff officers are the core military skills and not knowledge of UN specifics. Focusing on core skills is important to help member states deploy more female peacekeepers. These personnel must be deployed into operational roles in battalions, police components, and headquarters. To succeed, they need the same military and police skills and experience opportunities as their male counterparts. One way to do this is to work with troop and police contributing countries to strengthen the female components of their forces and to focus on the junior commissioned officer level so that these women become examples for others. Partnership arrangements play an important part in capacity building. An increasing number of capacity providers are cooperating to provide assistance, maximizing resources and avoiding duplication. This spreads the workload and leverages specific national competencies. ITS also has partnerships with capacity providers where we cooperate to provide training to troop and police contributing countries. However, the UN's resources are limited. DPO and DOS have arrangements which extend our reach. The Department of Operational Support leads the Triangular Partnership project, which focuses on engineering, medical, and signals activities. Here, member states provide trainers, equipment, and funds which are required for the training of TCC uniformed personnel, while the UN manages the overall program. Over the last 5 years, the Triangular Partnership project has trained more than 7,000 engineers, signals, and medical personnel. Unfortunately, not all have deployed to missions, so we ask TCCs to do more to deploy the trained personnel. I'd like to thank Japan, which is our main partner for this project, and Indonesia, who will be hosting engineering courses in the ASEAN region next week. The DPO-led light coordination mechanism strengthens our efforts to identify training requirements, helps match capacity providers and troop and police contributing countries in need of support, and helps to coordinate and deconflict member states' activities. On a voluntary basis, a number of member states provide their training and capacity building calendars to help deconfliction, fill gaps through new partnerships, ensure that current training material is used, and to help member states sequence activities in cases where multiple providers are supporting a single country. In addition, it has matched capacity providers with member states, including those new to peacekeeping, and is sourcing personal protective equipment, medical equipment from a donor to support a deployed TCC. And lastly, how can you help? If you are a capacity provider, we encourage you to share your training and capacity building programs to assist the light coordination mechanism. Also, in late 2019, we conducted a survey of all member states to identify training and capacity building needs. The areas identified by member states where they would like more support were in descending order of priority: pre-deployment training, lessons learned, deployment, sustainment, force generation, and rotation. My point in listing these is not to diminish the importance of pre-deployment training support, but to highlight the number of areas where, one, addressing systemic capacities will make a massive difference, and two, to show that there are opportunities which are comparatively cost light and where a small amount of niche experience will make a big difference. For those that are involved in pre-deployment training, one, please ensure that you use UN standards and training material, as this is the basis upon which units are assessed during the pre-deployment visit. And second, use the information gained from that country's lessons learned to adjust pre-deployment training. My core message, and Arthur has already spoken about this, is that assistance to build national capacities for self-sustaining force preparation, training, and deployment will make the biggest difference. It supports consistent core professional standards, our gender goals, the need to broaden and deepen member state understanding of peacekeeping specific skills such as human rights and protection of civilians, and ultimately performance. In the long term, capacity recipients can and should become capacity providers, and we have multiple examples of this from our years in peacekeeping. We can all work together to achieve this goal through bilateral work, the Light Coordination Mechanism, and the Triangular Partnership Project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing with us the work of ITS, DPO, largely, and for these recommendations. I think it's indeed important to ensure the full cycle in training efforts, and not only to learn from lessons in the field and to inject them in training, but also, as you said, I think ideally capacity recipients will become capacity providers at some point, and really building these partnerships is critical to make that happen. So maybe I'll turn now to Kiki. Kiki Sweden has been involved in many training initiatives for both civilian and uniformed peacekeepers. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on these recommendations and on your own experience of capacity building for peacekeepers. Thank you.
Thank you, Namie. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to Ethiopia, Indonesia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea, as well as IPI for arranging this important event. I would also like to congratulate IPI and Arthur on the white paper on capacity building and then training for peacekeeping, a paper that provides key recommendations for the way forward. And it's a true privilege to be on such a distinguished panel. So I'm part of the Swedish mission to the UN, where I work for the Swedish government agency, the Folke Bernadotte Academy, FBA. I believe many of you are familiar with FBA, but for those of you who are not, it's the Swedish government agency for peace, security, and development, financed mainly by development aid. So FBA offers training and advice and conducts research to strengthen peace building and state building. Today, I'm very aware of the time limitations, and I'll do my best to keep within the minutes given to me. So I've therefore decided to focus my remarks on two areas: leadership development support and gender, more specifically gender parity and gender mainstreaming. Peace operations today are called on to tackle complex challenges. The conflicts are often complicated and the settings often unpredictable, at times even dangerous. And in the same way, the solutions are rarely one-dimensional, but require a multi-dimensional and comprehensive approach. At the same time, financial constraints are putting pressure on operations to become lean and mean, providing real and timely results. Leadership is key to the success and performance of peace operations. Leadership will provide a peace operation with direction and ensure that all of its members work efficiently together towards a shared goal. The leaders will need to do so in the multicultural environment, leading personnel not only from different national backgrounds, but importantly also professional. A well-functioning mission leadership team will reflect in the work of the whole mission. This is something that's also recognized by the UN, which through, for example, ITS and the leadership support section is looking at different ways to encourage strong teams to spearhead missions. FBA prioritizes leadership support in close collaboration with its partners. For example, right now it's offering EU missions leadership support in the form of virtual leadership support for groups of specific managers, individual coaching, as well as support for senior management teams of EU missions in the field. And support is given over time with a process-oriented approach, as opposed to one individual location, which will likely lead to little real change and learning. Peer-to-peer exchange and learning is a valuable tool. Indeed, mentorship programs are something that the UN has successfully worked with to support leaders of peace operations. FBA has also, for example, provided leadership support sessions for all chiefs of staff from UN peace operations, focusing on areas such as team development and a coaching approach to conversations. The next area I'd like to draw your attention to is gender parity and gender equality. As noted in the white paper, increasing the number of women peacekeepers should be prioritized. Gender equality improves operational effectiveness. And it's key that women are also found on higher positions, that they are part of the decision-making process. Women in senior positions are also important as role models for girls and women as well as boys and men. Efforts such as the ELSI initiative, which looks at possible barriers to women participation, should be commended. FBA has worked closely with the UN, for example, providing workshops on unconscious bias and gender responsive leadership, as well as arranging courses on peace operations for this, together with the UN, for the Senior Women Town Pipeline, which is a UN initiative to increase the number of women on senior civilian positions in peace operations. In addition, and importantly so, peace operations must work with a gender perspective, applying a gender lens to the work. Training on applying a gender perspective means ensuring that there's an understanding of the different needs, interests, and opportunities of girls, women, boys, and men when planning and implementing tasks in the field. This translates into more inclusive processes and ultimately more sustainable results. Finally, missions work on gender mainstreaming in the same way as all strands of work to be done with a long-term view, making sure that efforts are sustainable also after missions transitions. Indeed, the initiatives by peacekeeping missions can create an important momentum, which can then be built on when it's time to leave. So initially, I'd wanted to say some words also about new technology and training, which now was brought up among the questions. I don't know whether I should say anything about that now or leave it to later in the Q&A session.
I mean, if you want to just take 1 minute.
I will take 1 minute. I just want to highlight as well that I could not agree more with looking at, for example, the digital divide and the access to the internet. I would like to add to that the importance of looking how you use that instrument. It requires a different way of thinking on training, a different way of looking at the pedagogical approach, for example, making sure that it's still interactive, trying to still create a trust in the room, even if people don't meet, and making sure that people are attentive to learning, etc. So that's a different aspect to it to also bear in mind. So that was my comment on that.
Thank you so much, Kiki. Thanks for raising all these very important points on gender, on leadership technologies as well. I think it's important to remember that training and capacity building should not be based on one-off initiatives, and that we need to make them sustainable. Mentorship programs are critical to ensure continuous learning and continuous support, and not only pre-deployment briefings. So I think it's very critical. I'll turn now to Mike. Mike, as the director of the Office of Global Programs and Initiatives at the US Department of State, could you maybe share your views as well on the priorities you have identified for UN peacekeeping and the way your office approaches these issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Namie. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And I would also like to thank the countries that are co-hosting this webinar, along with IPI, and then Arthur for his absolutely excellent paper. It was really well done. It's going to be very helpful as we go forward towards the ministerial in April. Let me start by taking a moment to provide a brief background on the United States' peacekeeping capacity building activities. The United States Global Peace Operations Initiative, or GPOI, serves as our flagship program. It's focused specifically on building international capabilities to more effectively conduct United Nations and African Union peacekeeping operations. GPOI is managed through the United States Department of State. However, as program activities are predominantly focused on building military capabilities, we plan and implement GPOI-funded efforts in close partnership with the United States Department of Defense, and particularly our regional combatant commands. Currently, we are engaged in 55 bilateral partnerships, and we support a range of regional training courses and exercises, as well as extra budgetary projects at the UN. Each of our bilateral partnerships is unique. It's based on our relationship with the country, the nature of their peacekeeping contribution, and their assistance requirements. As Namie mentioned, we've been asked to speak about impact-driven partnerships from the perspective of a capacity building provider. So this morning, I would like to highlight 4 key factors that we believe underlie the effectiveness of GPOI's efforts. First, is a direct linkage between our capacity building initiatives and United Nations force generation efforts. Our process for assessing and prioritizing training, equipping, or other assistance requests has evolved in recent years with the establishment of United Nations Peacekeeping Capability Readiness System, or PCRS. We now require that all new assistance be linked to a capability pledge in PCRS. The process of formally registering a pledge requires a demonstration of political commitment that helps ensure our assistance packages are supporting a viable, deployable capability. Moreover, the United Nations process for validating registered pledges through the assessment and advisory visits, or AAVs, helps identify specific training or equipment gaps, which enables us to more efficiently target our assistance. In fact, with the country's permission, the United Nations has allowed GPOI observers to participate in AAVs to our partner countries, which fosters triangular discussions about identified shortfalls that the United States can help address. Secondly, we view our active partnerships as long-term capacity building relationships that build towards concrete objectives. In consultation with each partner, we identify a mutually agreed upon end-state objective, often focused around the partner's ability to train, deploy, and sustain whatever peacekeeping capability they have pledged to the PCRS. We then work with the partner country and the United States government stakeholders to develop a multi-year plan for directing GPOI-funded assistance. Thirdly, an important aspect of our capacity building approach through GPOI has been our focus on what we call full training capability, meaning that we look at the full spectrum of factors that influence a country's capacity to effectively prepare, deploy, and sustain its peacekeeping forces. This approach includes training and equipment needs, but also addresses institutional capacity building components, including the availability of a national trainer cadre, whether that cadre is appropriately resourced and trained to execute staff, individual, and unit training appropriate to the capabilities being deployed, the availability and process for developing and refining training programs of instruction, and the training environment, including classroom and field training facilities, and the availability of appropriate training equipment and aids. Moreover, it is important to note that pre-deployment training alone will not produce an effective peacekeeping unit if there's not an upstream military education system in place to develop core staff and soldier skills, or if such training does not nest within a broader structure for managing human resources, financial resources, and logistics. Accordingly, we are also expanding our employment of long-term embedded advisors to address broader institutional capacity building requirements. I too would like to also emphasize the importance that we place on gender considerations. One of GPOI's defined program objectives is to support the increased deployment and more effective employment of female peacekeepers. In addition to active diplomatic engagement and training related to this topic, we also explore obstacles that limit a partner from integrating a greater percentage of women, and we target investments to address these barriers. As one example, we have committed significant funding to construct barracks and latrines for women at peacekeeping training centers to overcome practical barriers to female participation. Finally, we are increasingly focused on ensuring training aligns with UN policy guidance and incorporates UN training materials. The United Nations has made great strides over the past few years in developing and strengthening training policy and standards. However, dissemination still remains a challenge. our partners do not always have a clear understanding of or access to the evolving guidance and training documents being published by the United Nations. Accordingly, we've partnered with the UN Office of Military Affairs and UN Integrated Training Service to develop what we call a UN Peacekeeping Materials Training Reference Guide. And we have distributed this guide, which includes CDs with copies of all current materials to all of our partners. We also continue to provide funding and administrative support for events like the UN Operational Readiness and Assurance Seminars, which enable the Office of Military Affairs and the Integrated Training Service to provide direct guidance on performance and training standards to troop contributing country leadership and training centers. In closing, I would like to quickly touch on our process for measuring the effectiveness of our program activities. First, our program office includes a dedicated monitoring and evaluation team, which implements a 3-tiered monitoring and evaluation framework focused on outputs, outcomes, and impacts. The team, in collaboration with other program stakeholders, collects a robust set of data to compile and report on program outputs. Frankly, just collecting that range of data required to comprehensively report on what the program has done, being numbers trained, deployment statistics, gender statistics, et cetera, is a really significant effort for us. However, the more difficult effort is determining what those outputs have accomplished. The team analyzes program outcomes through information gleaned from activities such as lessons learned workshops, as well as the conduct of annual partner country assessments to measure progress towards end-state objectives. More difficult still, we endeavor to evaluate program impacts by assessing how deploy assistance contributes to stronger performance in mission. Recognizing that this is more of an art than a science, we must largely rely on anecdotal information and trend analysis, drawing from mission reporting by the United Nations or external organizations, as well as our own mission visits to assess over time the effects of sustained deploy assistance. So in closing, in the interest of time, let me leave it there. However, we welcome further discussion on any of these concepts during the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. I think it's extremely important to emphasize the fact that the link between training and capacity building initiatives with the UN Fourth Generation process is really critical, and I think it's extremely important to ensure that the training that is delivered will actually answer to a need. And I think what you mentioned in terms of measuring effectiveness, yes, indeed, it's an important endeavor, and it requires a lot of investment and resources, but I think it's the key to really make sure that it's impactful in the end, and that we contribute to structural changes and empowerment with troop and police contributing countries. So thank you for that. I will turn to Fumio. Fumio, Japan has also offered critical support to build the technical capacities of UN peacekeepers. So could you maybe offer some lessons learned from these initiatives and your own recommendations for future engagement? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Namie. And good afternoon, Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Director of Japanese Foreign Ministry participating from Tokyo. Let me first express my appreciation to the governments of ROK, Indonesia, and Ethiopia, as well as IPI for putting together and realizing this event. And in addition, I would like to express my deep appreciation to Mr. Author Butelis on the white paper. I think it serves a very good basis for discussion. I would like to elaborate further on triangular partnership in which my country participates and make some comments on the paper. May I ask the secretary to share my PowerPoint? Thank you. The Triangular Partnership is a direct outcome of the 2014 UN Peacekeeping Summit, and it is established in 2015. Since then, 40% of troop contributors participated in this project. In the graph in front of you, you have in horizontal axis the GDP per capita PPP. In the vertical axis, you have percentage of military expenditure in the government spending. The size of the bubble represents the number of troops as of December 2019. As you might recognize, regardless of the size of troop contribution nor GDP per capita, member states willing to contribute to the capacity building can be part of this partnership. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the progress so far on the triangular partnership. As you can see in the box on your right, training provider, in this case Japan, provides trainers led by Lieutenant Colonel. The host country provides training facilities, and the UN Secretariat brings the trainees from the member states and manages the implementation. Each entity brings its contribution. I would like to draw your attention on the field medics, which is in the middle. Field Medics Assistance Course is designed to provide life-saving interventions to injured peacekeepers during the first hours after the incident, until more highly trained caretakers arrive. The preparation of the course is led by the UN Secretariat, together with the experts from a few member states. This is one of the examples that by UN Secretariat taking the lead and the member states providing the expertise and appropriate trainees, the gap will be effectively tackled. May I ask the Secretariat to close my presentation? Now I would like to make 3 comments on the white paper. First, in the recommendation, as many emphasized, the paper emphasized the need of prioritization of the training and importance of commitment by PTCCs to build their own capacity. The key to success is a political decision by the contributor to use and train its forces for the UN peacekeeping. If there is such decision, there are countries where its troops significantly improve their performance within 5 to 10 years. For example, Cambodia. In 2013, Cambodia has been deploying engineering units to Lebanon, but they wanted to contribute better in engineering. They requested capacity building assistances from other countries. Assistances were provided from some member states, including mine, and 7 years later, Cambodia currently deploys engineering units to Mali, Central Africa, and Lebanon. As to which member state who has such political decision, UN Secretariat might be better positioned to know such member states. Registration to the UN Peacekeeping Capability Readiness System, PCRS, could be a useful tool to identify such country, which I echo with Mike. Secondly, the paper also refers to the link between the performance evaluation and the capacity building efforts. It is much complicated to evaluate the impact of the training on the performance than evaluating the outcome of the training. But I agree with its necessity. The unit performance evaluation by force commander might possibly be a tool. Lastly, a word on triangular partnership and like coordination mechanism. Triangular partnership is an open living framework that develops with the contribution of each member state. So does a like coordination mechanism. If there is a member state who intends to contribute to the capacity building of others, I think it's worth thinking of using either like coordination mechanism or triangular partnership so that UN Secretariat is somewhat involved or take initiatives in such efforts. I understand there are a certain number of national training centers that open its courses to other member states. The more member states utilizes these 2 frameworks, the more diverse trainings available for many contributors. In this way, I believe it would effectively improve the performance of unit peacekeeping. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fumio. I think yes, the importance of national training centers is also mentioned in Arthur's paper and can really be prioritized in terms of sustainably building their capacities to ensure that then they will be able to share lessons learned with other member states and replicate the training cycle over and over again. So with that, I think I'll turn to David, our last speaker. So David, Ethiopia is a major contributing country and the recipient of training and capacity building support from member states and the UN. So what would be your recommendations to build these sustainable, systemic and institutional capabilities within TCCs and PCCs over the medium and long term, to better, and what also would be your recommendations to better connect these training efforts with the actual performance on the ground? I think it's an issue that has been raised a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namie. I'm very glad to join this virtual discussion and also see many of my former colleagues. Ethiopia is pleased to join hands together with IPI, Indonesia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea in organizing this important discussion on impact-driven peacekeeping partnerships for capacity building and training. We all know that securing sufficient peacekeeping personnel with the necessary training and capacities, adequate resources, and rapid deployment capability has been one of the major challenges in mounting UN peacekeeping operations. In this regard, we note the efforts that have been exerted to address this challenge through the ongoing reforms to make UN peacekeeping operations more nimble, efficient, and effective. Achieving progress, of course, certainly needs the mobilization and political support of member states. In this context, improving training and capacity building is indeed a major shared commitment that we have made as part of the Action for Peacekeeping initiative. Hence, the need to continue to highlight this important issue as part of the broader discussion on peacekeeping reform. The new challenge that we are facing in relation to the COVID-19 situation also underscores the need for renewed dynamism in these efforts. We are indeed very grateful to IPI and Arthur Butalis for the excellent paper, which provided a useful framework for our discussion today. We cannot also agree more with the priorities and recommendations outlined in the paper. We believe the practical implementation will certainly go a long way in improving peacekeeping training and capacity building. We have members of the panel who eloquently spoke on the salient issues on the topic at hand, including current trends in training and capacity building, areas where further progress is required, and how member states can move towards impact-driven partnerships. Therefore, I would not want to repeat the points they raised. We believe the discussions we have today would certainly help us as we look forward to the Peacekeeping Ministerial to be held in Seoul next year, particularly the need for member states to make much more concrete, meaningful and impactful capacity building and training pledges at the upcoming ministerial cannot be overemphasized. Our discussions will also feed into the preparatory meeting on training, capacity building and partnerships due to take place in Addis Ababa under the co-chairmanship of Ethiopia and Japan. The meeting, which was originally scheduled to take place this month, had to be postponed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I want to inform you that it will be convened as soon as the situations permit. Ethiopia, Namie, as you have said, is one of the leading troop contributing countries to UN peacekeeping operations, and it attaches great importance to improving peacekeeping training and capacity building. This is the objective of the Ethiopian International Peacekeeping Training Center in Addis Ababa, which has been established to fill critical gaps in catering to the capacity building and training needs of Ethiopia and other African countries in the continent. Ethiopia is pleased to have been working with other bilateral, regional, and international partners in this regard. Particularly, I wish to thank Japan and the United Nations Development Programme for their important support and contribution to the center, which aspires to become a regional and international center of excellence in peacekeeping, peace building, and conflict resolution, with a special niche in organizing integrated training programs that enable Ethiopia and other African countries to deploy able military and civilian practitioners in peacekeeping operations. Some work is also being done in collaboration with Indonesia to facilitate the co-deployment of peacekeepers. We agree with the issues highlighted by Ambassador Jani in this regard. But the center is a fledgling institution which needs to continue to improve and refine its training programs to meet its aspirations and also contribute to addressing pressing capacity gaps, produce sustainable systemic and institutional capabilities, as Arthur was saying, and lead to a measurable improvement in the overall performance of the UN peacekeeping operation. In this context, we share the challenges and constraints highlighted by Arthur in the white paper, and we believe the priorities and recommendations outlined therein will definitely provide a useful guide. Particularly, the possibility of forging triangular partnership arrangements and implementing them is something that we think can be further explored. We also attach great importance to enhancing UN-AU partnerships in capacity building and training. Therefore, we take note of all the inputs and suggestions made today, and we share it with the center as they continue to endeavor to improve their capacity building and training programs. Finally, we look forward to continue collaborating with you all in enhancing impact-driven peacekeeping partnerships for capacity building and training to increase peacekeeping performance and ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers, particularly in light of the challenge posed by the new realities that we are facing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. I think we have 25 minutes left for the Q&A session. So I will now open the floor to the audience for questions to the panel. To ask a question, please type your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I will make a selection of questions and read them to our panelists to answer them live. Alternatively, participants can also raise a hand through this function on Zoom if you want to be given the floor and ask your question directly to our panelists via audio. I will ask you to be brief in your question, either by writing or by audio to allow time for a dynamic conversation. But before I turn to the audience, I will give the floor to Ambassador Cho because I think you have a question, Ambassador, already. Thank you.
Thank you, Namie, giving me the floor again. I have a question for Arthur, who emphasized the importance of performance evaluation. And indeed, we recognize its importance. However, if we look into what is happening in the field, we can see some room for improvement because so far, mainly there are self-evaluations. So we need to have some reflections on this issue. In this regard, Mrs. Jetteland talked about the importance of leadership. I couldn't agree with her more. Leadership is far more important than simple field manuals. But can you evaluate the quality of leadership of your own self? So we should look for how we can improve the mechanism of evaluation. One idea comes to mind that we can think about a composition of a few TCC members as an evaluation team. So by doing so, we can have more objective evaluation, and also we can develop evaluation methodology. I guess by doing so, we can improve also the standardization of PKO in various fields. Thank you. Thank you, Namie.
Thank you, Ambassador. I will take another question from the floor. So Mark and Mike both emphasized that peacekeeping training need to be grounded in overall professional training of uniformed personnel. Effective green helmet training is therefore a prerequisite for effective blue helmet training. And these should be complementary and sustained. In many countries, peacekeeping training doesn't fall under regular training command. The situation in police contributing countries is even more fragmented. Any comments from panelists on how this is being addressed? I also had a question on force commanders' assessments and generally also on performance assessments, and the fact that many of the tools that I use to assess performance are punctual, with punctual visits or investigations, results from BOI investigations or iOS assessments. I'm wondering, and Arthur, I think you mentioned this in your paper, if you could tell us more about how to really make sure that we will have the cycle and this link between performance evaluations and training, and how also to ensure that beyond punctual assessments, we have this capacity to do it on a continuous, constant basis. So I don't see other questions. I think the audience is still sending a few of them, so I will wait a little bit, and in the meantime, I'll give the floor back to Arthur to start answering these questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for all the questions. I feel, I mean, some of the panelists are probably even better suited than I to answer, but I'll attempt a few, and maybe I'll also try to answer the question that the ambassador of the Republic of Korea asked in his opening remarks as well together. So. So to start with the question on performance evaluation, I think, I mean, yes, you do raise an important point about the fact that there's largely self-evaluation, but I think that the paper notes that there's been some significant progress, especially when it comes to the force commanders assessment and the enhanced pre-deployment visits, in that these, I think, when they're done, of course, properly, when the force commander of a specific mission or the police commissioner of a specific mission actually do honestly assess those units. Now the challenge is how to bring all those different elements into a coherent whole, and I think that's the next step. In terms of the leadership question, I think there are many different levels of leadership we can speak of, but I think a number of speakers have made the point that leadership is key, of course, to performance, but to also, you know, infusing changes and to the morale and et cetera of those units. But maybe to link that to the question, I think from Kevin Kennedy, on how to you know, better integrate those elements of training, peacekeeping training at back home, and the issue of green training. I think, you know, one of the points that the paper makes is that really starts at home, but that leadership is not just the force commander, is not just about the selection and the induction briefings of the force commander and the rest of the mission leadership, including civilian leadership, which is important, of course. But the point is that it starts at home because leadership is at all levels. And when speaking of uniformed personnel, I think we make the point that peacekeeping shouldn't be just an add-on. It should be integrated into the career of male and female officers, as well as non-commissioned officers, who then play a great role in peacekeeping operations. Of course, you know, some TCCs and PCCs have sort of longer, greater peacekeeping cultures and have done that, right? Those military that are, you know, primarily about deploying in peacekeeping operations maybe have more of a peacekeeping culture. But I think it applies to newer TCCs or TCCs that may not have integrated those elements of peacekeeping into their national curricula. Then on the question raised by the ambassador earlier about technology, I think there are different elements there. I think absolutely to meet the challenges of today, we need to be able to bring technology on board, and some TCCs themselves bring it by virtue of being technologically advanced. In that case, of course, the challenge is for those TCCs to be able to raise the level of the whole mission up, and to have other TCCs also benefit from the technology. Then when it comes to technology capacity providers, which I think is the point you're making, I think this can also be very relevant. But then again, to some of the points that were made, I think then there's a few key elements. It needs to be really tailored to the needs of those TCCs, to the needs of the mission, and it needs to be directed at TCCs who are then able to sustain the equipment and the training that would be provided in terms of onboarding technology. You know, let's think of, for instance, night vision goggles or small UAVs. You know, these could be, yes, useful for some TCCs, but then it can only be useful if it's not a one-off, if the TCC then has the ability to really absorb this kind of support and to sustain it and make it part of its national contribution over time, over multiple rotations.
Thank you, Arthur. I will turn to Mark. Mark, there's also a question on training of trainers. If you can give us some ideas on what is being done to train trainers as well. I'll add this to the list. And if you want to answer any of the questions that were already raised during the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Namie. So let me deal with 3 issues here. The first one was this point about peacekeeping training and its divorce from professional training. I think the thing to do is to look at the national security and defense strategies of countries to see whether or not they actually recognize that peacekeeping is a core task. If they do recognize that it's a core task, there should be a light touch on peacekeeping in the professional development of military and police officers. We should not find ourselves in the situation where the first time that a soldier or a police officer encounters human rights or ethics is when they do pre-deployment training. These are the foundational issues for much of our peacekeeping work, and this needs to be mainstreamed through the core professional development of military and police officers. On the training of trainers issue, all of our work focuses on training of trainers to build national capacity. We never train operators, with the sole exception at the leadership level, where we train force commanders, heads of mission, police commissioners, and then the next level down, which is mission chiefs of staff, sector commanders, force chiefs of staff, and FPU commanders. So we are always working to build that national capacity through training of trainers activities. This places an obligation on member states who are providing people for us to train. They need to be trainers. There needs to be a consistent commitment that these people will actually deliver training when they get back to their country. And they need to meet the core prerequisites for the course: fluency in language, being a trainer, peacekeeping experience. Because if they don't do that, we are expending our resources without actually meeting our objective of building that national capacity. And on the last issue about evaluations, both the Office of Military Affairs and the Police Division are putting into place a robust evaluation capacity, which is internal, which is based on tasks, conditions, and standards. This will ensure that there is a consistent, standardized approach to the assessment of all uniformed personnel across missions. So we have a process in place which allows us to do this. We meet with the Undersecretary General of Peace Operations and Operational Support at least monthly to review what we're getting back from the field. So this process is already in place and is rooted in tasks, conditions, and standards, which, for example, on the infantry, you can find the United Nations Infantry Battalion Manual. I know that Mike would probably want to answer part of that question about the divorce, but the apparent divorce between peacekeeping skills and core professional skills. So I'll leave it there. Over.
Thank you, Mark. And maybe if I may, another question actually came up, and I think it's directed to you about the light coordination mechanism. I think we all agree that it can be a very good tool to consolidate the needs and gaps of TCCs and peacekeeping missions. But what should be done, and what does the UN plan to do to develop this mechanism into more than just sharing training schedules? The question from Abo, if you want to directly respond to this.
Okay. Very briefly, it's called a light coordination mechanism because no member state wants to be coordinated by the UN. One of the key issues that we do here is to deconflict training requirements. And as Fumio has said, it doesn't operate in isolation. The Triangular Partnership Project is also part of this mechanism of directing support to member states. So what do? Yes, we share training calendars, but the point of sharing training calendars is to deconflict, to make sure that countries are using the current training material and to create partnerships. With GPOI, for example, we know that the US-led GPOI partners with other countries to support capacity building, particularly in Africa. We're also using the light coordination mechanism to create partnerships for new and emerging troop and police contributing countries which have committed in PCRS. That's a key point. In order to get support from the UN, because of our limited resources, we require a commitment in the peacekeeping capability readiness system. And lastly, we're sourcing equipment and training for countries which can be either delivered in their home location or the equipment to be provided in mission. So there's a lot which can be done. My last point is that the light coordination mechanism is one person who is supported by extra budgetary funds. When those extra budgetary funds go away, the capacity goes away. Until we got those extra budgetary funds, I was doing this work, and it's work for one person full-time. So we need that continued support from member states to make this work. Equally, for the Triangular Partnership Project, we need member state engagement to continue to support this, both in terms of training capacity, but also in terms of support for the personnel that work there. So that's it from me. Over.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. I will maybe ask two more questions to the other panelists as well, and I'll get back if Arthur, you want to also answer. But we have a question about standardizing training. What more can be done to standardize trainings of peacekeepers from TCCs in developing countries with a view of augmenting capacity to deliver best in the field, knowing that member states are ultimately responsible for training, how to standardize these trainings in developing countries. Another question on training for police, actually, and how do you actually change the culture of local policing if peacekeepers are working in conjunction with these actors? Do you have any thoughts about this? So maybe I'll turn to Kiki first, if you want to take any of these questions. Thank you.
There, clicking my way forward. I actually want to go back to the question of assessing leadership, which the ambassador brought up, which I think was very interesting and very important. What is good leadership? And I'd like to just highlight as well the work that's already being done by the UN. In 2017, there was it was the UN System Leadership Framework was agreed upon, which highlights 8 specific characteristics which define UN leadership, what's required by a UN leader, which is something to build on in this work. But I agree, it's again, I think it's important to look at the different phases, recruitment, support and evaluation when one is working, and then also following up after having left the position. So there are different phases as well to do assessment at. And again, the UN is doing a lot, looking at 360s, for example, on how to develop this. But that's just, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kiki. Mike, do you want to jump in? Sorry, I think you're muted.
Unmute. There we go. I wanted to compliment what Mark said with regard to the divorce possibly between green helmet training and blue helmet training. First, I completely endorse what he said because I think it's accurate. I think what we find in GPOI in the 55 or so countries that we really devote our efforts towards is that we find sort of different approaches to this. In some cases, the regular training command, as the questioner asked, really does incorporate peacekeeping training. In others, it's probably true that they don't. I think for us, what we find is, well, first off, we need both. We need the green helmet training, we need the blue helmet training. But in terms of how do we approach it, we have to meet them where they are. And this was what we were saying, well, we have to tailor our training to each country and its unique sort of posture. And so we meet them where they are. We know that we need to get them, in some cases, they show up without the green helmet training that they really should have. And we know what the UN really will require of them in terms of where they're deploying to. And we tailor our training to include improvements in the green helmet part, and certainly whatever is needed in the blue helmet part. Of course, and all of this is underpinned by the UN's training materials, structured, well outfitted peacekeeping training centers, and so forth. So I'll leave it there, but the bottom line is basically we just meet them where they are so that we can get them to the mission that they pledge to deploy to and be effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Fumio, do you have any points that you wanted to raise as well? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Namie. I would like to come back on the standardization of the training. As Mark and Mike said, it's the overall basis of the content of the training is the UN manuals. But in reality, when it comes to the engineering training provided by Japanese troops, we make standard beforehand what to provide during the training. But in reality, when we face each trainees, there are differences in language and there are differences in skills that they have on certain engineering equipment. So the trainers in the field adapt themselves to each respective trainees by putting interpreters or modifying slightly the content of what they teach. And thus, that would lead to, by the end of 6 weeks training, the trainees respectively increases their skills. So the outcome of the training will be assured. So that's what we need is a very flexible adaptation by the whole stakeholders. Thank you.
I'm sorry about this. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I will turn to David to give you the floor if you want to answer some of these questions, David. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namie. Now, just to highlight 2 points from our side, from our own experience. One, in terms of standardization. I think we need to do more, especially in light of the focus on the new standards, you know, in terms of human rights, sexual exploitation and violence, so on and so forth. I think there is some room for improvement. The second issue is in terms of policing. You know, Ethiopia has much more experience in peacekeeping. In terms of institutional arrangement, it used to be the Ministry of National Defense handling this, but now we want to come in a big way in terms of UN policing, and our institutions do not have much of an experience in this regard. So we have a lot more work to do in UN policing. What I see as a challenge is, as I highlighted in the white paper, also the issue of language. The issue of, I mean, understanding the operating area, the culture and tradition, so on and so forth. Our peacekeepers had been deployed in Haiti, and some of our policemen were deployed in Haiti, and this was a serious challenge. So these are some of the gaps that we need to fill. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 points. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. And I realize we don't have much time left, but I think General Fai from OMA would like to take the floor and share some points with us. So General, if you're here, please go ahead. You have the floor. General, we cannot hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay, unmute. So thank you very much. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to just emphasize on 2 points. Looking at what Mr. Mike Smith was talking about, the basic military education. As we develop in OMA, we targeted this point, and then it's where we rely on the link between the green training and the blue training. as the blue training should be a continuation of the green training, because we need basic. And it's what we call basic soldering. And then we develop all these actions on the UNIBOM. We have developed specific books like UNIBOM, Engineering Manual, and Engagement Platoon, just to target the new concept of engagement of female personnel on the peacekeeping. But to develop this knowledge, we have developed all what is needed, and then how to develop, we develop the knowledge required, we develop how to train, and then we discuss with the TCC to make sure that they can conceptualize this training. And then we are working on this, but we rely on the partnership, and then it comes on the triangular partnership we are talking about, where we need a partnering country to help if we have on the local situation. If the local situation cannot allow a proper training, we have a partner, external partner, that we put in link with this country to help them develop this thing. We are also having another issue is the translation of this manual. We are trying to translate it in a language that are accessible by the local trainers, either in French, in English, and then so they can use this to understand, to better understand and use this language to target, even if they can use it for local language to access to the soldier, to the basic, and make sure that these capacities are well explained and well developed. And it's why when we go for the pre-deployment training, we can rely on already what was developed during the green and oriented on peacekeeping training. So this is what I wanted to highlight, and then say that in the military, we have, on the OMA, we have developed also some specific tools for evaluation of the military, evaluation of the unit, evaluation of the individual, evaluation of the headquarters. All these tools have been developed, and then we have had great achievement for this first year. We are trying to emphasize on, and then from the lesson notes, try to develop this towards the field mission. So there are a lot of initiatives ongoing, and to target the training, to target the performance, and to make sure that we have a comprehensive approach that can help exactly enhance the capacity up to this one, the training of the battalion commander, the targeting the integration at the tactical level in the field mission, like in the sectors and all these things, are some domains that was developed by OMA, and they're looking at trying to implement the action for peace, okay, in this regard. So these are the initiative I wanted just to highlight here, and then to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, General Fay. It's really appreciated. Thank you. I just want to check with Arthur if you wanted to take a minute, if you had any concluding thoughts, but I'm conscious of the time, and I know we'll have to close soon. All right, thank you, Arthur. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sorry we're not able. Sorry.
No concluding thoughts. Just to add to what was just said, I mean, one of the recommendations in the paper on this, besides the dissemination, translating of all those UN manuals, which have already been mentioned, is the need for suggestion that national peacekeeping centers also do more to support each other, sharing lessons, training curricula, facilitators as well, which might also help standardize. Thanks.
Thank you, Arthur. Well, unfortunately, we won't be able to take more questions, and we're running out of time, but I think today's conversation has really provided us with concrete ways forward, and I really want to thank and congratulate Arthur for the analysis he provides in the white paper. I think it's an extremely detailed, well-researched and timely contribution to the planning and the preparation of the next Peacekeeping Ministerial and the Preparatory Conference. So I sincerely hope that it can inform the formulation of member states' pledges and engagement with the Secretariat in the coming months. Thank you to all the speakers for such a dynamic discussion, for sharing concrete lessons from past, current initiatives, innovative ideas for the future of peacekeeping partnerships. Thanks to Ethiopia, Indonesia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea for partnering with us. And thank you all for participating in this policy forum and following us online from all over the world. The recording of this event will be made available on IPI's website, and the white paper itself will be published shortly. So thank you to all, and have a great day.